The first time Duke dug up a bone, they thought nothing of it. Probably a leftover from whoever lived here before us, Mark said, brushing dirt from the thick, pale object in his hand. Old dog bone, maybe. His wife, Elise, wrinkled her nose but didn't protest. The house was old, an early 1900s Victorian with creaky floors, drafty windows, and a yard that had grown wild before they moved in 3 weeks ago. Duke, their 7-year-old German shepherd, had taken to exploring the overgrown backyard with boundless curiosity and dirt-caked paws. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, Duke was at it again. Same corner of the yard, near the crooked oak tree with the blackened bark. This time Mark didn't find just one bone. He found several. They were different sizes, thinner, curved oddly. "I don't think these are from any animal," he muttered. "What do you mean?" Elise asked, her voice tight. He didn't answer at first, just stared at the soil Duke had churned up, brow furrowed. Elise crouched beside him, brushing more earth aside with her fingers. What emerged from the dirt made her heart stall. A tiny, toothless jawbone. Mark didn't sleep that night. He kept the bones wrapped in an old towel in the garage, far from the kitchen where Elise hovered, pacing and checking the baby monitor every 10 minutes. Their daughter Emma was only 3, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to sense something was wrong. Even Duke had grown strangely quiet, lying curled up near Emma's door instead of his usual post by the back window. Mark stared at the bones again, spreading them across the workbench beneath the dim glow of the garage light. They were small, fragile, some cracked with age but not decayed. He found one that looked unmistakably like a femur, but smaller than a grown adult's. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe a large dog, a deer maybe, but that jawbone. No deer had molars like that. The next morning, Elise made the call. A non-emergency line first, then a follow-up to the local sheriff's department. An officer came by that afternoon, younger than expected, with a forced smile and a clipboard he barely used. He took photos, bagged the bones, and offered a canned explanation. Could be animal. These old properties, sometimes you get unlucky. But what if they're not? Elise asked. They look human. He didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. Later that evening, Duke began scratching again, same spot near the oak tree. This time Mark grabbed a shovel. Elise held the flashlight, her hands trembling. They dug until the sun had set and the moon had risen. Dirt piled up, damp and thick, clinging to Mark's boots. Then came the crunch. The shovel hit something hard, not a rock, something brittle. Mark knelt and cleared the soil by hand. It was a skull, small, round, the size of a toddler's. The yard was cordoned off by morning. Yellow tape flapped in the wind like warning flags. Uniformed officers scoured the backyard, speaking in hushed tones, while Duke watched anxiously from inside the house, ears pinned back, tail twitching. Elise sat on the edge of the couch, arms wrapped around Emma, her gaze locked on the back. Door, as if expecting it to burst open. Mark stood beside a detective now, older, sharp-eyed, with a clipped voice and a dark trench coat that billowed in the breeze. "Detective Lang," the man introduced. "We're treating this as a potential homicide, possibly decades old." "Homicide?" Mark repeated, his voice hollow. "The bones are human. Small, early analysis suggests they belong to a child between 3 and 5. Elise flinched. "Judging by decomposition and soil layering," Lang continued, "we estimate they've been buried for at least 30 years, maybe more." Mark couldn't stop picturing the skull, the empty sockets, the cracked jaw. "Did the previous owners have children?" Elise asked quietly. Lang flipped through a thin folder. "The Donnellys lived here from 1978 until 2 years ago. Mr. Donnelly passed away in hospice. No record of children." Elise frowned. "But that's not possible. I saw a photograph in the attic last week. A man and a little girl, maybe 5 years old. It was tucked in a box of holiday ornaments. Lang's interest sharpened. "Can you show me?" They climbed the attic stairs together. Dust motes floated in the slanting light. Elise reached into an old crate and pulled out the picture. Sepia-toned, edges curled. It showed a man in suspenders holding the hand of a girl in a blue dress. Her smile was wide but strained. Mark hadn't noticed it before, how the man's hand gripped her arm just a bit too tightly. Lang took the photo gently. "She's about the same age as the bones." Mark's stomach churned. Downstairs, Duke began to growl, low and rumbling like thunder beneath the floorboards. Elise rushed down and found him staring at the wall behind the basement door, teeth bared. "What is it, boy?" he barked once. Loud, then again, directed, forceful. He pawed at the basement door until the knob rattled. Something was down there. The basement door creaked open with a long groan that echoed into the stillness of the house. Duke didn't hesitate. He pushed past Mark and bounded down the narrow stairs, nails clicking against the worn wood. "Duke, wait!" Mark called, grabbing the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Elise stood frozen at the top of the steps, clutching Emma tightly. "Don't go down there alone." "I won't," he said, even though he already was. The basement smelled of mildew and dust, thick with the scent of rotting wood and something older, something sour. The single bulb above flickered to life as Mark tugged the chain. Duke stood in the center of the basement, ears perked, body rigid. He was facing the far wall, concrete, cracked, partially covered with an old wooden cabinet that had been there since they moved in. Only now the cabinet was shifted, just enough to reveal the edge of a door, a second door, hidden. Mark approached slowly, brushing aside cobwebs and dried leaves caught in the frame. The handle was rusted but intact. He glanced at Duke, who gave a low, urgent whine, tail stiff. The door creaked open to reveal a small, windowless room, barely more than a crawl space. Inside, the flashlight beam fell on objects strewn across the dusty floor. A cracked porcelain doll, missing one eye, a blue hair ribbon, faded and brittle, a child's shoe covered in grime, and, chillingly, a child's drawing tacked to the wall. It showed a stick figure girl in a dress, standing between two tall figures. One had an angry scribble for a face, the other a circle of red crayon where the mouth should have been. Scrawled beneath in shaky, childish handwriting were the words, "Help me." Mark stumbled back. When he brought Lang down an hour later, the detective's face went pale. "This wasn't just a grave," he said. "It was a prison." They searched public records again, and this time Lang found something. A missing persons case from 1984. A girl named Lily Atwood, age 4, last seen playing outside her aunt and uncle's home. That home was now theirs. The air in the house had changed. Mark could feel it in his lungs, thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Elise barely slept, clutching Emma at night while Duke paced the hallways, pausing every so often to growl at corners or stairwells. The sense of dread was no longer something Mark could explain away. Not after what they found in the basement. Detective Lang returned with a forensic team. More of the room was uncovered. Old scratch marks, fingernail deep, lined the inside. Of the hidden crawlspace door, a plastic bracelet was found beneath a broken floorboard. It read, "Lily." There was no longer any doubt. The bones they'd unearthed belonged to Lily Atwood, the girl who vanished in 1984. Her case had been cold for decades, filed under missing child with no resolution. Her aunt and uncle, Margaret and Joseph Donnelly, were questioned extensively at the time, but without a body or evidence, no charges were ever filed. Now, with the discovery of Lily's remains in the basement room, the case was reopened. And the Donnellys were dead, but the story didn't end there. That night, while Elise and Emma slept, Mark sat alone in the living room, combing through the attic boxes Lang hadn't yet confiscated. He opened a water-stained notebook, Margaret Donnelly's diary. The entries began normal: recipes, gardening tips, visits to church. But then, May the 2nd, 1984. Joseph says she can't stay outside anymore. She's too noisy, too wild. The neighbors are starting to ask questions. I told him we should call her parents, but he just looked at me like I was stupid, like I was a child. May 17th, 1984. She cried all night. I gave her bread and water. I begged him to let her out. He slapped me. June 1st, 1984. I heard scratching. I heard her crying again. But Joseph swore she was asleep. He lies. God help me, I know he lies. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before. Lily was officially reported missing. Mark stared at the page until the words blurred. In the days that followed, word spread fast. News vans circled their street. Reporters camped near the sidewalk. Neighbors looked at the house with widened eyes and whispered behind hands. But Mark barely noticed any of it, because Duke had started digging again. Not in the backyard, inside, beneath the stairs. Mark followed him one evening, flashlight in hand, watching the dog paw frantically at the baseboard. It took 2 hours to pry the wood paneling off and dig through the dirt packed beneath the house. And there, wrapped in a rotted bedsheet, was a second set of bones, smaller, younger. Lang arrived within the hour. Tests later confirmed it was the remains of a newborn. No record of a second child, no missing infant filed in connection to the Donnellys or the Atwoods, but the evidence was irrefutable. There had been 2 victims. Why didn't they find this before? Mark asked. Lang shook his head. Because they weren't looking. They moved out a week later. The house was sealed, declared a crime scene indefinitely. Elise couldn't stand to step foot inside after that final discovery, and Mark didn't blame her. Emma had started waking in the middle of the night, whispering, "The girl in the wall says she's not scared anymore." Mark didn't ask her to explain. As they packed the last box into the car, Duke paused on the front porch and looked back one final time. The wind rattled the porch swing. A shadow shifted in the upstairs window, but when Mark blinked, it was gone. He rubbed Duke's. Eden whispered, "You found her. You brought her peace." The German shepherd licked his hand once and followed him to the car.